evening and welcome. We are convened as the Provo City School District Board of Education. Today is Tuesday, June 14th, 2022. We are convened at 280 West, 940 North in Provo, Utah, and the time is currently 7:16 p.m. We will begin with a roll call, and we'll start with Terry McCabe.
Should we make Nate go? He's here.
Or he's not.
Or
no, never mind. He's not here. Terry McCabe, board member.
McKay Jensen, board member. Keith Rochelle, superintendent.
Melanie Hall, board president.
Jennifer Partridge, board member.
Gina Hales, board member.
Derek Anderson, business administrator.
You want his job? Okay. And Nate Bryson will be joining us via Zoom. Nate Bryson will be joining us via Zoom, and we need to excuse Rebecca Nilsson for this evening. So I will begin with open remarks, and if you will join me in a word of prayer. Oh, thank you. Is there a motion to convene?
I move that we convene our business meeting.
All right, thank you. We're now in our business meeting. Our dear kind Heavenly Father, we're grateful that we could meet here this evening as our school board. We ask you to please bless us as we make decisions for our school district and our community, that we might have the inspiration to be with us. We're grateful for the moisture that we've received over the past few days. We're grateful for the beautiful land that we live in. And we ask you to please bless us as we go throughout this meeting, that we may do so in a civil and kind way. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ, amen. All right, our Pledge of Allegiance will be done by Jason Garrison.
I invite everybody to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next we're going to have our employee recognition, which is the Provo Way Award. So let's turn the time over to Jason Cox, our Deputy Superintendent.
Good evening, school board. Thank you for this opportunity to recognize a wonderful group of people tonight. When I call your name, I do see that there's a couple of people who are attending with us tonight. When I call your name, please stand. We want to make sure we get that chance to recognize you. So tonight we'll be recognizing Chelsea Beck, John Orgill, Krista Leidickson, Veronica Peterson, and Dallas Brooks. And so let's give them a round of applause. We have a video of our presentations, and then afterwards we'd love to give you the chance to thank them for their work. So I'll talk about that when we're done with the video. Thank you.
Well, good morning and welcome to Provo High School. We're here as a celebrations committee, here to recognize Miss Chelsea Beck, a computer programming teacher and a district employee who helps with all things Canvas. We're going to join her in her classroom right now.
So you guys know what a great teacher she is and the effort she puts into making sure that you do really authentic project-based learning kinds of things. Not everybody across the district knows that, so we wanted to make sure she was recognized. The other thing that a lot of people don't realize is just how much she's sacrificed to make sure that Canvas works for everybody, not just at Provo High, but in the entire district. That's Chelsea that runs that for everybody. So we're just super proud of her and so glad to have her as a district employee. So congratulations, my friend.
We're the Celebrations Committee. We are here at the district office to recognize Sergeant Orgill.
Congratulations, well, she deserves it. John is a phenomenal individual, and I've had the pleasure of working with him for a number of years, and over the last couple of years we've been through a number of things to try to make our school district better and the city better. And John not only advocates for doing the right things, but steps up and does it on a consistent basis with kids, with the community, from safe walking routes to you just finished up Cops and Bobbers, which was fun to see how kids were able to go and catch fish and build relationships with the police officers. And I just think you are an incredible example of who we are as a Provo school district, and you represent us well. And I need you to know how much we value and appreciate you. So thanks for all you do.
Welcome to Lakeview Elementary. We are the Celebration Committee from Provo City School District, and we are here to surprise Krista Dixon, who is a library A. So come follow us, and we're going to go surprise her.
I could go on and on about Krista. She's amazing, but I feel like a lot of the work that she does here in the library is thankless. It goes unseen by everybody. You're not the center of the spotlight or anything, but the library could not run without you. You fix all the books, you put all the books on the shelves. The kids think a magical library fairy comes through and does it, but it's Mrs. Liddickson. So she's amazing, and we love her.
Well, thank you.
And I was thinking the same thing. I would just echo that. It's a lot of the behind the scenes things, but you've been willing to do whatever you've been asked to do, and you're a vital part of the school, and we appreciate all you do. So I was super happy when I heard that Olivia had nominated you for that, so congratulations.
And I prefer to stay behind the scenes, but you guys are sweet. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Good morning. We are here at Dixon Middle School to honor one of our amazing employees, Veronica Peterson. She's the attendance secretary here. So come with me and let's surprise her.
Ever since I joined Dixon, one thing has been clear to me, that the Provo Way is represented so very deeply by you and who you are each day. Children that come to school know that they are safe, cared about, and respected by you. Their parents trust you, and your coworkers appreciate you. You give so much of who you are to the school all day, every day. And as someone who has been welcomed by you, I know how special that feels and how incredibly giving you are of your time and your knowledge and your heart. And to me, no one represents the Provo Way more than you do, Veronica, and this is well deserved.
We're just glad we got you here at Dixon. Hope to keep you here, as she said. All the schools you've worked at, nobody says anything but great things about you and the great work you do, and mirrored by all of us. Thank you so much for being a part of our family.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're here at Provo Peaks. We're going to celebrate Dallas Brooks, the Title I coordinator here.
One coordinator, and she was in charge of setting up the family activity this year. And we're just really impressed with how above and beyond she went, making it a really, really great night for not only our students and their families, but the community and everyone involved with that.
And she also works really hard on other activities, and she's just amazing and does so much for our school and our community.
Thank you.
Now let's give them another round of applause. Like I mentioned, we'd love to be able to give you the chance to thank them personally. So we're going to have those who are nominated tonight come on up and go across here. Be careful, there is a cord, but we'd love to let the board members thank you personally for the work you do.
Good job, John. Thanks for everything. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, there, Veronica. I didn't know you were excited. Where were you last year? But you do keep moving around. What's next? Okay, good. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
All right. That's one of my favorite parts, is to get to celebrate all these amazing people in our district. So thank you so much for all your hard work that you do in our district, and it's so fun to be able to celebrate you. We're going to turn the time over to Derek Anderson, our business administrator, and he's going to give us our budget hearing for our preliminary fiscal year 23 budgets and fiscal year 22 budgets.
Perfect. I just didn't know if that was disconnecting or not. So what you have before you is the final proposed budget, or sorry, the final budget for fiscal year FY 21, 22, and the proposed tentative budget for FY, the FY 22, 23. Sorry, the year did not change on that. My apologies on that. But those are, it's actually flipped, so it's the final budget for F 21, 22, and the 22, 23 proposed budget. So I apologize. The budget process that we go through is we kind of plan and prepare, and we start engaging the individuals in the organization, asking what the needs are. We put requests out to see what the school needs are, what capital needs are, and we start trying to gather that list. From there, we meet as a council to talk about what are the priorities, and we estimate those priorities. We look at things where we can what are potential savings, what are comparisons, things like that, and we kind of from there communicate and build our budget based off of that. So right now, we're are adopting that budget. We've already built and planned for sustainability, and that's why later on you'll see how we are planning to sustain the future this budget that's being adopted. So the guiding principles are goals for student achievement, to be a priority for the budgeting process, programs and providers that have demonstrated a track record of success in achieving the board's desired learning outcomes, and students will be prioritized for funding. The budget process seeks to allocate available resources optimally in a way that will create the most benefit for children that we serve. The budget process encourages a review of past spending decisions and how we've done things, and identifying and discontinuing programs that are not achieving their objectives and are not as cost effective as available alternatives. The district budget ensures that every student is given an equal chance to succeed through equity and funding among general students and population, as well as providing the extra support for struggling students. And that's this year where there was a large focus on, and last year, a large focus on the learning gap and trying to close that learning gap. And there was significant funding from the ESSER funds that was allocated towards that. That we will maintain a long-term perspective in the budgeting process to ensure consistent application of proven strategies to better achieve the student performance goals. The districts will be transparent in the budgeting process, including providing true costs of serving students, identifying constraints on spending, and being clear regarding which actions are being funded. So the next piece is kind of going to go over the snapshot of our local revenue, okay? So as you can see, this is the assessed valuation on a per student basis for Provo students, okay? And you can see it was maintained relatively flat after the Great Recession, right? And then in 2017-18 it started to crop up, and then all of a sudden what you saw happen was a quick escalation. Those 21, 22 net number, while estimated originally, we were thinking that they were going to be conservative this year. It was not, and I'll be able to show you that later. And so the assessed valuation per student is going to go up even more than the 542. It'll be probably, I hate to put a number on it, but it will be up higher than that as a final number. And what does that mean? Okay, that means on the amount of value on a per student basis as we assess a tax, okay, there's more value attached to that student in terms of property values. And so for every increment of tax, that means we generate more money when values are rising, okay? So that's kind of the translation to that. So here's the assessed valuation on a per student basis compared to our neighbors, Nebo and Alpine, okay? So you do see we are the highest of the 3 districts, okay? Part of that is because Alpine has such a large tax base and not a large number of students, and they're also, which has mostly been residential, but with the Silicon Slopes and things like that, over time that will start to trend up, and may eventually surpass us, or depending on whatever happens with the district, there could be a shakeup there. Nebo, having been typically more rural, that's why you see their assessed value per student where you see it. So here's where things land statewide, right? Now, when we're by ourselves, it looks, holy cow, we're really high. But actually, when you bring every district in the state onto the chart, we're still below the average. Okay, I mean right below, but we're still below the average. And then you just see the other two are much, farther down. So this is a tax rate history of Provo School District. Okay. Wait a second here. That's my apologies. My apologies. Guess I should have had Joe run this thing, then it wouldn't be here. That's the one right there. So my apologies. I opened the last year file and I was like, wait a second, this is the third number that's looked wrong. There's no way it was that many. So I apologize. I'll skip because the first handful of slides are the same. So I will skip forward. So there the years are correct, and then we'll move forward. Okay. But there you go. So you can see here where I was talking about it's higher. There you go. And then we're at compared to the average, and then there's Alpine and Nebo. Okay, so there is so here is the history of the tax rate. So you can see here from the proposed tax rate, that is the proposed tax rate for this year. It's based on the assessed valuations that we estimated at the time of building the budget. Okay. As of yesterday, they made those values live and finalized. Our assessed valuation went up quite substantially, so that proposed rate is going to come down. Okay. But we still have to go through the work and get that final rate. But when the notice goes out and everything's finalized, it's more going to be like around a 7.225, right? That's kind of an estimate where I was seeing it land, but we'll need to run the numbers. But they just finalized them yesterday. So here's what that means. So the tax histories over time. Okay, so if you look, here's a breakdown of our taxes for Provo City School District on a $100,000 of home value. Okay, so next year, based off of if the board adopted the rate I previously showed, it would be an average. It would be about 412. So then you look from the prior year, it was 386. So the estimate was, what is that? $26. Okay, so $26 was the estimated increase. On a per $100,000 level. It's not near as high as it's ever been in the last 10 years, but it's not the lowest. Okay. So here's the state comparison, the breakdown of the state tax rates across the state for all the school districts. And you can see ours is just above the state average. About 4 or 5 districts up. But ours and Alpine's are right next to each other. You can see that, right? Where they're the one that's right below us. Here's a breakdown of where the funding comes in terms of capital debt and the voted and board levies and where we land on those. Okay. So this is the indirect cost rate. There's a trend of our indirect cost rate over the last 10 years. So while our unrestricted rate has gone up, our restricted rate has gone down.
Can I ask a question just really quick?
Yes.
So back a slide, that debt one where we're up, that's because we're building some new schools.
That's correct.
And so typically that's the number that districts change the most depending on where they're at in their building inventory. Is that correct?
Correct. That's very correct. So as you build new schools, and that we are this last year, the state went and announced where all the school districts are and all the governmental entities are in the rebuilding of schools or facilities that have unreinforced masonry. Okay, unreinforced masonry, in the event that there's an earthquake, those unreinforced buildings are the most likely to fall. Okay, we are, I think, one of the only districts in the state, if not the only, that when we finish Wasatch and the new shoreline facility, we will have no students in any building that have unreinforced masonry. So we've been very proactive in trying to mitigate that risk.
But we didn't get like a short amount of usage out of those two oldest buildings in our district, right?
Correct. Those facilities got the old Dixon Middle School is, I believe, the oldest still standing middle school in use in the state. And Wasatch, I cannot remember the build date, but it's I think 50 plus years old.
It's like 75. It was built in 49.
What was that?
Built in 49.
There you go. So 70 years old. So both of those buildings have been in use for a very long time. So this is the investment rate for PTIF. Okay, so this is where we can house money instead of in a bank, right? Because bank, the FDIC will insure up to $250,000, but we keep more on hand than $250,000 for operations. So by putting it in the PTIF, it's secured through Utah Money Management Act, and we get a higher interest rate than what it would be just storing it in a traditional savings, a depository account at a bank. So this is the history of that PTIF on a monthly basis back to 2018. And you can see the interest rates crashed, but they're starting to just tick back up. So, we will see as those come back up a little bit more interest income on that piece that's holding there. Our enrollment trend. So what you can see is this has kind of been the enrollment trend, and what that big drop was is our online school, our e-school. We ended up shutting that down, and that's the reason for that big decrease. But if you actually go back farther, our enrollments are fairly stable. And how do enrollments come into effect at the school district? Well, we're partially funded based off of our enrollment. It's partial funded, but it also helps determine, class sizes, the number of teachers we're going to need, determining all those different metrics. So we keep track of this enrollment number quite closely. So here's the long-term enrollment trend and what I was talking about, and you can see if you go back to 2008, 2009, 2010, and then move forward to today, that line is right there, okay? And there was a big jump due to that e-school. We did also have, we were up, I believe, around 14,000 students, of actual headcount students, but due to COVID, those numbers decreased and haven't come back yet. So the WPU, so previously I just talked about how we get partial funded for students. That partial funding for a student is that number that's attached right there. So as you can see, over time, that number has increased, and they do that to try to keep up with inflation, and also and for growth and things like that. So back in the mid 70s, it was around $600. And today it's, over 4,000, or next year will be over 4,000. So this is the revenue by source. So previously where I talked about how the state funds and the WPU funds partial, right? So that is that blue segment, the dark blue at the bottom, that's the state funding. The green piece is the local funding, and then the light blue is the federal funding. And that's been the history of the breakout of the funds over the last, 10 years. So then we're going to get into the financial summaries, and this is just a fund by fund breakdown, okay? So this is all funds combined, okay? The budget consists of about $237 million of total expenditures. This is the actual dollars behind the budget and where everything is broken down, okay? So you've got your general fund, your student activity, all the way across all of our funds, our revenues and our expenditures by summary function. So we group things in functions so that way they have comparable, we can compare things with other districts and things like that. So you have your instructional staff or your instruction, and then you have your local funding and state funding and things like that. So that has kind of been a history over the last 4 years, and then the next year's proposed budget. So this is the general fund, and this is our operations fund. This just is where mainly all of the head count of the operations resides in. So this next year, the proposed budget is for just the operations is $157 million. So then this is a breakdown of just Fund 10, along with the history. Okay, so the prior 3-year actuals, the current year final amended, and then next year's proposed. Okay, and that breaks down the local revenue and the expenditures, and this is the summary level also. Then as you move forward, the next page on page 23 then starts to break out the revenue. So that actually is breaking it out by your major class cycles or your major class groups, okay, that we call out. And then that also breaks it out from your local, your state, and then your federal sources. So then it actually goes into the expenditures. So that actually will then break out your expenditures by function for instruction, for student services, for instructional staff, for district administration, school administration, the business services, and we break that out on a 3-year history of actuals, then your final amended budget for the current year, and then the proposed budget for the next year. The next page is just a further continuation of that, where it breaks out the operations of maintenance and custodial, and then transportation. Page 26 then breaks down just mainly as a graph to show you as a percentage-wise how all those spending or funding breaks the breakdown in percentage. So then this one, on page 27, that actually breaks down all of your expenditures by function and the percentage of our total expenditures. And then the other one is the distinction between how much money goes to instruction. So as you can see, 2/3 of our budget go directly to instruction, right? That's in the classroom. The next slide is kind of a breakdown of the expenditures by function on the actuals, and then the final amended and the proposed, and then we also break down the percentage also of that and how it lands. The other piece of that is it shows the expenditures by pupil. So we take the total number of expenditures you see on the left-hand side and then divide it by the number of students, and that's the per pupil spending that you get in each of those functions. So the next slide is our major grant awards. So all the state or federal money that we get, okay, this is a call out to each of those of how much we received in state and federal grants and awards. And those are very specific of what they have to go to. You know, what we receive that for, we can't use it for anything else. Okay, so when you think about it, you know, a large chunk of your budget, you know, what does that say? 86 million in total state revenues. $110 million of our revenue this year has strings. Well, not fully 110. My apologies. The K-12, the WPU is a little more flexible, but a large chunk of those have strings attached to them. The large bulk of them have strings attached to them saying how we specifically have to spend that. So this is the debt service fund, and this is just straight to service our debt. It's the only thing that goes in here. It's the money that come in to pay for our bond payments, and the money turns around and goes out and pays the bond expenditure, the bond payment. Okay. And it gives you a history of and the breakout of how the bond's been paid for. You can see it's local property tax, and then the expenditures and what they've been over the last 3 years, plus the final year, and then next year's proposed. The next schedule is our debt schedules. Okay, we have our GO debt schedule, and then we have our municipal building authority debt schedule attached to there also. Okay, and it just kind of gives a breakdown of the principal payments that are due and the interest that are due, and you can tie back the payments for next year back to the GO schedule to show that they match, right? And that's how much we're requesting. Here is a debt waterfall schedule. This is probably my favorite graph of the whole thing. Good job, Joe. But this is our debt waterfall schedule, and where each of the tranches of debt that we have will, if we do not restructure the debt or we don't prepay it, this is the timeline that they'll be paid off. So then this is our capital projects fund. Okay, this one you see wild swings. This is very typical of a capital project fund, because as you issue debt and start building things, and it becomes, you know, what you see right there is the fund balance jumped way up. Well, that's due to issuing debts, and now all of a sudden the black line, the fund balance is dropping, and that's because we're spending the money on the capital project. So that's kind of the reason why you see such large changes in this fund, and it's very typical. The next slide is the history again of how we've spent the money in the past, the proposed budget for the current year, or for next year, and then the final amended budget for the current year. The next page, on page 36, is also again the breakdown of how the revenue and expenditures and the percentage of those are. Page 37 moves on, or sorry, yeah, 37 moves on to our child nutrition program, and this kind of gives you the same thing, a history of where things are at, and where they're planning on being for next year. 38 does the same thing. It kind of it's just more, it gives you the actual dollar numbers of how it's all, where everything has been, and then where we plan to have the budget for next year and the current year. Let's see here. What you can see here, I'm going to call this out really quick so you can see. So if you see in the actual of 2020 and 2021 and the final amended of 2021-22, if you look at the local revenue, okay, it went from $700,000 the previous year to 36 and 87, and then it jumps back up to $1 million. that's strictly due to the CARES funding. During COVID and the CARES, they eliminated, they paid all student lunches and breakfasts at 100%. And so the money that it was collected then from there was just nominal. Other things that they weren't paying for. Page 39 is again just a graphical breakdown of the child nutrition program. The next slide is our student activities fund, and this is the fund where for student fees, or if the student has fees that they pay, this is housed there specifically for that that program. We can't lump it in and combine it with our operations and things like that. It's specifically for the student fees. This gives a history again of the prior 3 years of actuals, the current year proposed or amended budget, and the proposed budget for next year. The next slide on page 42 is the building reserve fund. As you can see here, we've got the fund balance at 18.4 million. And what I'm going to ask the board to do is, as we've kind of discussed things in the last little bit, is because we had to post this to the and get this notice out, and then as we've been discussing things, I'm going to ask the board to make an amendment to increase the for an interfund transfer of $2 million this year. Is a potential if we need it or to do it, and that there's leftover and we want to shift things around. So as we've kind of been discussing, what would be an ask is to say, as we passed and to make the motion to adopt the budget, to amend this and say with the adjustment of $2 million for an interfund transfer into the building reserve fund.
Are you going to show us later where that comes from?
What was that?
Are you going to show us at some point where that extra $2 million is?
So the reason we want to do it is because we could have the money in the depending on how things land in the general fund is where that would end up being transferred from. So so what we would have is just say we'd want to do an interfund transfer to cover that over there. So is that? Any other questions on that?
I think I just need to see it more concretely.
I think she's just asking where are we taking that $2 million out of? What other fund is it?
So that's the general fund, this one right here. So what we would.
Can you show us where that excess is?
So there's not an excess right now. Let's come back over here, okay? And let's say that the expenditures come in less than what is expected, right? And we don't have the decrease, right, that we would think we would have in the unrestricted funds. Because what you see here is that's typically restricted funds that are like federal or state programs that are drawing things down. And so it's on page 22, and it shows your fund balance beginning of years 43 and the ending fund balance is 29. If the unrestricted spending was favorable, we would be asking to say, hey, can we maybe shift from there over to the building reserve to utilize that? Because we have the capital projects that are going on between Wasatch, Shoreline, and Timpview, and with the supply chain constraints, we possibly see a potential need for that. It doesn't mean we can't ever transfer it back. It would just give us a little bit extra in case that something comes up.
So this is the good news scenario. So,
Bingo.
So because we see a need where there are some unpredictable costs around construction, we're saying if those costs are there, we propose that in the budget it shows that it would come from careful spending in the general fund to cover that, rather than some other mechanism.
Correct, correct. And I'll call this out. I mean, the last few weeks have been crazy. You can see here we've got it budgeted in the Fund 10 already. There's that right there. The piece over in the building reserve, it didn't get put in there. And as reviewing it, I just noticed it, and so that's why I'm saying, can we add that in there?
Are you done?
Yep, I was moving back forward. Is that okay? Or
No, I mean, if
no,
you're
there's
done,
more.
I'll ask
Nope.
questions.
Yep,
but
there's more.
Okay, keep going then.
So the next one goes into the tax increment fund. This tax increment fund, this is on page 44. There's nothing really, it's just a mechanism that it was from state law. This really kind of goes with the RDAs, okay, and the CDAs, the tax increment, if a business wants to come here and apply to say, hey, will you waive some of my property taxes that I may have? We have to record it here to show how much is being forgone each year, okay? So the next slide, 45, is that also, but it's just the dollar number breakout. And over the prior years and along with the amended for the current year and proposed for next year. So the next slide is the 46, and it's the Municipal Building Authority. Okay. This one, as you can see, is this is a brand new fund because of the MBA bonds that we just issued. Okay. And so you can see it jumps from 0 zeros in the past to now there's $110 million as the fund balance, and then there's the spending for next year. Okay. The next slide, 47. That's the breakdown of the spending. I'm also going to ask an amendment for this one because we spoke with our accounting firm this last week and was able to get in touch with them and get this nailed down of how they wanted it. And it's really just I've seen it done 3 different ways. And so speaking with our auditors, they wanted it done this way, so okay, fine. So what I'm going to be asking for, and it's in the motion already, I've typed it up, where we're going to ask to increase the budget in the final amended $2 million, and next year's proposed the expenditures increase $30 million. That doesn't have any impact on taxes or anything like that. It's just a mechanism of some CPAs say, look, you've got as an asset, and as you spend money, it goes from a cash to an asset, but they want to see it recorded this way and then consolidated. It's an accounting thing. It's just.
So to be clear, this is the money that went into the bank after the sale of the bonds.
Correct.
So this is money in the bank versus that's why we haven't seen very much expenditures because our construction projects are not that far along. But the bonds were sold, and then we put the money in the bank.
Correct. And some CPA firms and some accounting guidance, depending on how the fund is treated, will say take the money you have, and as you spend it, it's now moved into an asset on the balance sheet. It's a balance sheet. And what you're seeing here is an income statement. It's super stupid accounting jargon, but that's the reason why we need it. It's just they want to see it recorded a different way, all on the income statement, and then at the government-wide, it's eliminated. So anyway, the next one is the district foundation. So what you'll see here is the revenues and expenditures are, on the red and green lines, and they're small. I'm proposing that we jump that up to $1 million at the final amended and for next year. And the reason is, and here's the reason why, say the board adopts the budget today, okay? And then all of a sudden in 2 weeks, somebody comes forward and says, I want to donate $1 million, let's say for some improvement at one of your schools. We'd have to do one of 2 things: legally turn them down because the budget's adopted, or say, yeah, we'll take the money, but we're going to get a finding because the budget's already been adopted at this lower amount. So you just boost it up because it's a budgetary piece and it's through the foundation that if somebody were to come forward with a large donation between the time that the budget's been adopted and when we finally close the books for everything, we don't have any issues with our audit. So that's the reason for it. Doesn't mean that there's something that's coming in, it's just to protect us in the event that something like that were to happen.
So we're not actually moving money, we're just leaving it as an option for someone else to give us.
Correct, correct. And so the next slide, slide 49, is the actual numbers that have occurred in the past, and then what you see there for the end of this year and next year. So then we move into kind of the supplementary information, okay? So right now we currently have a truth and taxation hearing scheduled for this year. It's going to be August 9th at 7 p.m. at Dixon Middle School, if the board approves it. So why is truth and taxation needed? Well, we just issued new bonds to pay for Shoreline and Wasatch, and so that's a large chunk. That's about almost $7 million a year in bond payments. The other piece to this is employee salary increases are needed to stay competitive, right? If you look at our teachers, and that's bachelor's, master's, and PhD, you can see here in the bottom red that their lifetime career earnings, right, are lacking their competitors. And so this is also to try to bring them up a little bit closer to what the market is doing, and try to close that gap. Okay, and it's not just our teachers; it's kind of across the board, right? We had massive openings this year in our ESP groups that just stayed unfilled because we couldn't fill them. So we need to correct some things so that way we stay competitive and we're not putting so much on our existing employees and being a revolving door where people come here for a couple of years and then say, I'm going to go to a neighbor because they're paying more. So one of the questions that always comes up is, so why does Alpine have higher salaries but a lower tax rate, right? How does that work? Here's how it works, okay? They have economies of scale, right? That's a big thing, economies of scale. The other thing that they've done is they've gone and condensed their elementaries down to like 1,500 student elementaries, okay? So the overhead on a 1,500 student elementary is, around $1.5 million. Our overhead on an elementary is around $1.1 million, but we have, 4 elementaries that would make up that one. So, we're spending $4.5 million to their $1.5 million just in overhead. So that's another piece. Alpine has teachers teach their prep period. Okay, that's another piece to this. So they're paying their prep period, and that's standard across the board. All of them are teaching it, and that's just baked into their contract. And their student teacher ratios are higher. So between those structured those structures that they have, that's why they're running a more efficient model. But we have neighborhood schools, right? That's more local control. Their PTA has input, and our populace has enjoyed those neighborhood schools. So if the board approves to go through truth and taxation, right, there is a piece in here called the homeowner's tax credit. If they meet the socioeconomic status to be able to apply, they can apply to this and go to those websites, and they can apply to have an abatement or a rebate so they do not have to pay that, or it can be foregone, or they can have a rebate on a portion of their taxes. So we encourage, if anybody that meets those levels, utilize it. That's what it's there for.
And the circuit breaker statutes specifically apply to people on fixed incomes, correct?
I believe so. That's correct. Yeah. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe you're correct. So these are the large purchase requests that we're asking the board pre-approve for next year as we do standards, so that way Most of it's all technology and security things. The next item on your list are the items that are planned for next year's capital improvements, okay? And that's the breakdown of the capital improvements piece. So the request from the board was that we're going to ask you that you approve the fiscal year 2021-2022 final budget with the amendment of the $2 million in the building reserve and the $2 million in the municipal building authority. And then we're going to ask you to approve the tentative budget for proposed budget with the amendment of the $30 million in the municipal building authority. Then authorize any budget adjustment necessary to reflect the funds received from the certified tax rate in the event the board does not approve a truth and taxation rates in August. And then we are going to ask that the board approve that we go through truth and taxation for the 2022-2023 fiscal year. Questions?
I do. On page 2, sorry to go all the way
back. Oh man, you're going all the way back.
Sorry.
Isn't that the title page?
But I was trying to let you say everything first. Yeah, so on page 2, I see that it says engaging stakeholders and developing priorities is part of the process, but it feels like the board isn't involved in the process until June when the budget needs to be approved, which in my opinion is too late to make any real changes. I know Jennifer's previously suggested that our winter board retreat be moved to March after the legislative session. Can we make that meeting only about the budget? Because it's similar to the way the city council does their budgeting. Then we have more input and we can, help set those priorities.
I think that's good to have that one in March, but also we have our extended study session in the fall, and I think that's when we generally talk about just what our priorities are as far as the direction of the district that then helps the budgeting process know where to place the financial priorities, right?
That's correct.
So we are doing things in the fall. It's just not as obvious that it's for the budget because we're not talking financial numbers at that time. We're talking about the goals of the district.
Yep.
Yeah.
Then it should be more obvious.
Okay.
So the taxpayers know we're talking about next year's budget. Make it more obvious.
And I'm happy we can change anything to where we feel that we're either being more transparent or we're having more planning or discussion or strategic planning on those things. I'm happy to make any changes that we want to make in the future on that.
Okay. On page 8.
What was that? Sorry?
Page 8. I see the column titled Estimated Proposed 22-23. Is that the tax rate based on the current tax rate or based on what we could have with the truth in taxation?
So this is the way it is. So hopefully I'm going to explain the way it is, and hopefully that's fitting within what you're asking. So the estimated proposed, the way the estimated proposed works, okay, is I'm going to pull it up. So you can see here, this is a huge ton of numbers that I've got pulled up, okay? So here's what's happened is in the past, these are all the actual assessed values, okay? Then we have to estimate what we think the state is going to say, here's your values, or the county is going to say, here's your certified rate value. And so we use a history of a trend to say what's happened in the past, what's the current market happening, what do we think they're going to do in the future. And as you can see here, the past has been real lockstep. I mean, between 106 and 109, and then you come down here and it's like 115 flat, right? I mean, it's been very lockstep. And so it makes things to project fairly easy. And so when this says estimated proposed, it's taking what the estimated when we build the budget, because that is not known. We just found out values yesterday. So when we build the budget, we have to say, what do we think they're going to come out as? And that's how that rate gets calculated, because we're saying, what do we think is going to happen? And based off what we think is going to happen, this is what the tax rate would be. And so the tax rate, if we nailed the projection, that's what the tax rate would be. So that's what that's meaning.
But we already know we didn't.
Correct. And you'll never hit it. You never hit it.
But we did it high, so when it comes to the actual number, it's
lower.
So
Correct.
the actual number is going to be 7.2 instead of 7.49. It's going to be.
So here's my quick and dirty estimate. I mean, I'll pull it up. This might be dangerous to do, but I'll do it. Oh shoot, I closed it down. No, it was just scrolling forever into infinity.
Can I ask a follow-up while you're looking? So what I think Terry's asking, and I'm curious too, is this estimated, is this with the rate adjustment we want to make in truth and taxation?
That includes the rate with the truth and taxation. So you can see now I've pulled it up, right? What you've got is that 7.4 number right here that I've got highlighted, that my cursor's now on. And that was based off of our projection. But if my calculations, rough calculations really quicker, hold true, the rate is actually going to be like a 7.206, okay? Based off of what's come in.
Because we're asking for a specific amount of money.
Correct. Bingo.
So when we see sort of this trend, so 2018-19 7.5, 7.1, 7.3, 7.0, 7.4 proposed, but it's actually going to be 7.2. Do we have any huge construction projects left in the, besides maybe finishing Timpview?
So we do have a couple extra projects that we've kind of been discussing.
But we're not in the same situation, say, where we found ourselves maybe a decade ago, or say 2013, where most of our inventory needed to be rebuilt.
Correct. It's very small compared to what we've had to do in the past.
So
over time.
So that 7.2 number, we're likely never gonna hit 8. We're gonna be 7.5, 7.2, and then we're gonna move into what we had a lot through the 90s and early 2000s of decreasing tax rates.
That is correct, 100% correct.
Great.
I noticed in the city council meeting last week that they had to say the percentage for, like, when you say
the rate,
approve
the tax rate.
District go through truth and taxation for this fiscal year, do we need to say specifically the percentage that we want to go up to?
So in the motion that I've got drafted out, it has the rates listed out that need to be adopted.
That's was my last question.
Okay.
Okay, other questions for this? There's a lot to take in, but thank you for a job well done.
You guys memorized it, right?
Yes. Every single.
Admire those of you who look at all those numbers every day.
I just want to have a big shout out. Joe has been instrumental in this process. He did the bulk of the heavy lifting, so thank you, Joe.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Derek.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're going to move into our public input portion. If you'd like to address the board, on my right, your left is a paper that we've asked you to fill out. And then if you'd like to address the board, hand it to Bonnie over here, and then we will have you come up and you'll have 3 minutes to address the board.
I just wanted to give him something.
He deserves it. All right, I'm not seeing anyone here to address the board this evening, so we're going to move forward with our business items. All right, first one, we're going to approve policy 1420 only. So Keith, do you want to talk a little bit about that one?
Yeah, this is per guidance from the state regarding when we take votes during a business meeting, and we have a member or more than one member of the board doing so by way of electronic communication. It just means that it has to be done by a verbal roll call. Yep.
All right, so is there a motion?
I move that we approve policy 1420 with the change discussed in study session.
Motion made by Board Member Partridge. Is there a second?
Is it 1420 or 1410?
I have it written 1420 right here.
Update.
It's two different numbers on the thing.
The actual policy is 1420. It's 1420 right on the policy.
Okay, that's it then. That's the right one.
Okay, so it's 1420. So is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Board Member Jensen. Is there any further comment on this? All right. All those in favor, please state your name and your vote. So we'll start with Board Member Hales.
Gina Hales, Board Member, aye.
Sure. This is new for us.
Jennifer Partridge, aye.
Melanie Hall, aye.
McKay Jensen, aye.
Terry McCabe, aye.
Nate
Bryson, aye.
Okay, so the motion passes unanimously. All right, next we need to approve the fraud risk assessment. Derek, do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Yep, so what you have before you is the fraud risk assessment. So each year we have to go through a questionnaire that's put out by the Utah State Auditor and answer the questions based off of things that, do we have these things in place or to try to mitigate risk. And so what you can see there is, you know, we've done a lot of work and we're trying to mitigate as much risk as we can. Doesn't mean that we've eliminated all risk. It just shows that, you know, we don't have 100% absolute assurance of eliminating it, but we have done a lot to mitigate it. And so this is that questionnaire, and so the board, we ask the board to approve it, and so that way we can then submit that to the state auditor.
Okay, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the fraud risk assessment as discussed in study session.
For, motion made by Board Member Hales. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Board Member Jensen. Is there any further discussion on this motion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, or sorry, can't do that. Gina?
Gina Hales, aye.
Jennifer Partridge, aye.
Melanie Hall, aye.
McKay Jensen, aye.
Terry McCabe, aye.
Nate Bryson, aye.
Okay, so the motion passes unanimously. Next, we need to approve the K-6 ELA curriculum program. Anne Marie, do you want to speak a little bit to this?
Thank you. The District Literacy Committee recommends that we purchase and adopt for use the Wonders program for grades kindergarten through 6. A caveat I didn't mention before is that 6th grade will continue to use it for 2 years, but then switch into the secondary adoption, because most programs now are putting 6th grade in secondary. That's where our state standards have 6th grade. However, they will transition for 2 years through the current materials. That's our proposal to you. And then the follow-up to that is to approve the purchase request of it.
Okay, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the adoption of Macmillan McGraw-Hill's Wonders instructional program for elementary English language arts courses.
Motion made by Board Member Partridge. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Board Member Hales. Is there any further discussion on this? All right, seeing none. Board Member Hales.
Gina Hales, aye.
Jennifer Partridge, aye.
Melanie Hall, aye.
McKay Jensen, aye.
Terry McCabe, aye.
Nate Bryson, aye.
The motion passes unanimously. Next, we need to approve the purchase of the K through 6 ELA curriculum program and materials. And Amory already spoke a little bit about this, so is there a motion on this?
I move that we approve the purchase of Macmillan McGraw-Hill's Wonders instructional program for elementary English language arts courses in the amount of $798,337.74.
Motion made by Board Member Hales. Is there a second?
I second that.
Second by Board Member Partridge. Is there any further discussion on this motion? All right, seeing none.
Gina Hales, aye.
Jennifer Partridge, aye.
Melanie Hall, aye.
McKay Jensen, aye.
Terry McCabe, aye.
Nate Bryson, aye.
All right, the motion passes unanimously. Next, we need to approve the Sex Education Committee membership. Amory, do you want to speak just a little bit about that?
Yes, state code has some very specific ways that we need to provide sex education. Part of that is they require a committee to be formed each year with employees and community members and parents. As part of that requirement, the Board of Education needs to approve the membership of that committee. You can see there that it has representation from our schools submitted by the principal, and then employees representing different groups like psychologists, administrators, and teachers.
Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the Sex Education Committee membership as discussed in the study session.
Motion made by Board Member Jensen. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Board Member Hales. Is there any further discussion on this motion? All right. See none.
Gina Hales, aye.
Jennifer Partridge, aye.
Melanie Hall, aye.
McKay Jensen, aye.
Terry McCabe, aye.
Nate Bryson, aye.
The motion passes unanimously. Next, we need to approve the professional development days. Jason Cox, do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Through our negotiation process, we worked on with the Teachers Association. We came to a point where we had chosen to have March 13th as a no work day. With that in consideration, we need to adjust the calendar for that, and also for the professional development days, which we traditionally each year have 3 of those within the calendar. We are keeping the one that is in October. We're also keeping the one that is in January, but we're asking that we move the March date to March 14th to be the day after the 13th, which was a day that's now a no work day. This allows for more actual implementation on the teacher's part from one professional development to the other, because it gives it a little bit more time in between.
Okay, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the professional development dates as discussed in study session.
I'll second that.
We will have to. I don't know if we're prepared to do it tonight.
Well, he said that that's part of this.
Yeah.
So I have a quick question before. Do we need to make a motion on both the amendment of the 13th and the professional development dates, or has the 13th already been? So do we need to restate this
Yeah, I
motion?
do think we want to restate it and add the 13th in there, because it is an ask, and the school board approves the calendar for the next year. That's a part of the negotiated agreements, and so we haven't come to you to ask to change the 13th yet. So it's not only the professional development days, but the 13th also.
Okay. So do you want to restate that for us?
I don't know how.
Go ahead and do it, Melanie. You can do
Okay.
it. It's easier.
I move that we approve the professional development dates and also the no work day to March 13th, as discussed in study session. Okay, motion made by Board Member Hall. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, motion made, or second by Board Member Hales. Is there any further discussion on this?
If I could just ask that once it's approved, if we could be proactive in sending that out to parents. I know some of us like to start planning family vacations and little weekend trips and things, and this changes people who are used to going, for President's Day weekend. They're going to want to start planning now, so if we can proactively send that out, I would appreciate that.
Okay. Board Member Hales?
Gina Hales, aye.
Jennifer Partridge, aye.
Melanie Hall, aye.
McKay Jensen, aye.
Terry McCabe, aye.
Nate Bryson, aye.
The motion passes unanimously. All right, next we need to approve negotiated agreements. Jason, do you want to speak a little to this?
Tonight we have for you the 3 negotiated agreements for each of our 3 employee groups. Again, this was it was a positive process this year. We worked throughout the year with each of the groups to try to make sure that we're meeting their needs, and then that allows us to be able to be prepared for negotiations, not have surprises, and work together to hopefully support them in feeling good about working for Provo and being able to complete that negotiation process. So tonight we're asking you for approval of those 3 negotiation agreements for this coming school year.
All right, is there a motion?
I move we approve the negotiated agreements as discussed in the study session.
Motion made by Board Member Jensen. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Board Member Hales. Is there any further discussion on this motion?
I want to talk again. Yeah, I just want to say it's easy to watch our board meetings, and it just looks like we quickly just see things and approve. And just want to speak to the fact that there's a lot of work that goes on before it comes here. So as Jason said, there was a lot of work with district staff and the different associations that we've negotiated these agreements with, and also as board members, we've studied this, looked at it. We're trying to balance. I personally feel teachers and all of our support staff and everyone involved in education, like, we want to pay you so much, you deserve so much, and there's so many constraints on what we can do, and we hope it's a good step, and I'm committed to continuing each year to look at how we can continue to do more and more for our everyone involved in helping our students. So.
Any further comments? All right, Board Member Hales.
Gina Hales, aye.
Jennifer Partridge, aye.
Melanie Hall, aye.
McKay Jensen, aye.
Terry McCabe, aye.
Nate Bryson, aye.
The motion passes unanimously. Let's see, Todd or Alex, would one of you want to speak?
Yes, good evening. Prior to every school year, the board is asked to review and approve the calendars for each of our schools to ensure that we're meeting the state minimum expectations for 180 instructional days and 990 instructional hours. Each of our schools propose meeting those thresholds for this next year, and we recommend that you approve those this evening.
Okay, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the 180, 990 calendars as discussed in study session.
Motion made by Board Member Partridge. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Board Member Hales. Is there any further discussion on this motion? All right, seeing none.
Gina Hales, aye.
Jennifer Partridge, aye.
Melanie Hall, aye.
McKay Jensen, aye.
Terry McCabe, aye.
Nate Bryson, aye.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously. All right, the next one is we need to approve the final 2020, no, this is wrong.
2021-22.
Yeah, the 2021-2022 budget and the original 2023 budget. So, okay, Derek, do you want to speak just a little bit? I know you just spoke a lot about it, but you can just give a tiny.
Yeah, so what you've got before you is the final amended budget for 2021-22 and the tentative 2022-23 operating budgets. They've got we've gone through a pretty thorough process to try to identify where there's possible savings, what we could possibly do to move things around and shift things around, and what we could do to ensure that we're on a good footing moving forward with our construction projects also. And because of that, I recommend that the board approve the two budgets as presented, along with the amendments that I've got in the recommended action.
Okay, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the 2021-22 and the tentative 2022-23 operating budgets with an increase of $2 million in the Building Reserve Fund and $2 million in the Municipal Building Authority Fund for fiscal year 21-22, and an increase of $30 million to the fiscal year 22-23 budget in the Municipal Building Authority as discussed in the budget presentation with the following tentative tax rates: a board rate of 00189, a voted rate of 610, a capital rate of 00185, a debt rate of 00147 for a tentative certified tax rate of 00749, which includes the charter levy and the basic levy that are controlled by the state.
Motion made by Board Member Jensen. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Board Member Partridge. Is there any further discussion on this motion? All right, seeing none.
Gina Hales, aye.
Jennifer Partridge, aye.
Melanie Hall, aye.
McKay Jensen, aye.
Terry McCabe, aye.
Nate Bryson, aye.
The motion passes unanimously. All right, next we need to approve the consent calendar. Is there a motion?
I move we approve the consent calendar.
A motion made by Board Member Hales. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Board Member Partridge. Is there any further discussion on this motion? All right, seeing none, all those in, or
Gina Hales, aye.
Jennifer Partridge, aye.
Melanie Hall, aye.
McKay Jensen, aye.
Terry McCabe, aye.
Nate Bryson, aye.
All right, we are now going to have a board member report by Terry McCabe.
All right. Do you want to just change it? Oh, okay. All right. So, we changed our committees. Was it the March 29th meeting? And these are the committees that I was assigned to, and after reading the minutes of the other school boards around the state, I made my board report according to my committee assignments. So the evaluation committee met in April, and we had to update policy 5240, and there's two parts to it for PEA and one for PESP. There was some updates with the state policy, and so we had to update ours. And Boyd should be presenting these to the rest of the board in the August meeting. So be prepared to look at those. The insurance committee, we met on March 30th, right before we left for NSBA, and it was an all-day meeting with the three finalists doing presentations. Most of the HR department was there, Melanie, Derek, and I, PEA, PESP, and everyone else who attended agreed the USI will do a great job as the insurance broker for the school district employees. So before everybody starts work again in August, there's probably some paperwork you have to fill out, right? And then the next committee is the Shoreline Construction Committee. We met in January, February, and March to go over construction plans. But I think we need to have, now that the bid date has happened, I think we need to have another at least one more meeting to plan the groundbreaking ceremony And I guess we could coordinate for the neighborhood meeting too. And then Principal Anderson told me he was going to start on the Safe Routes to School, working on that this summer. And then the Government Relations Committee, Jennifer and I met with Norm. That was before we changed to this, but we met with Norm Thurston on Day of the Hill. And then last week I was invited to some Zoom calls with two of the Republican Senate candidates, and I both asked them the same question. Are they going to have a point person that Utah elected officials can contact? Because right now it's, unless you actually have the direct link to our senators or congressmen, then it's kind of hard to get a hold of them. So they all said that they would, if they were elected, they would work on having a point person that we could contact. And then in March, I attended the Elected Women of Utah Forum, and it was great to meet other elected women around the state. And I really liked the public safety panel. My favorite person I talked that spoke was the Parowan police chief. He was kind of funny. And then and then let's see next. The three schools that I'm assigned to, Amelia, we need to give a huge shout out to their 6th graders because they beat the teachers at the kickball game, which is a huge deal for them. They've never done that before. And one thing I really like that the Amelia PTA does is focus their fundraising on providing money for field trips for students. Based on one of the talks, I can't remember which one it was, that we had at the NSBA, they said context matters in especially learning reading scores, and these kind of field trips help with those experiences and learning for the students. So I like the way that what they focus on. And then Franklin, they asked me to be on the relationship committee, and that's basically relationships within the school, within the community, with the school district, and that was actually kind of fun. Our last thing we did was hand out popcorn to the neighbors around the school. And then Franklin is the home base of the My Hometown Initiative, which is between the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the Provo City, and also the church across the street just north of Franklin is also the kind of home base for that area. And I've been taking my son to the play group every Wednesday morning, so they like doing that. And at Sunset View, wanted to point out too that at Franklin and Sunset View, they are doing summer breakfast and lunches for students 0 to 18 years old, or 1 to 18 years old, I think, but not at Amelia. So anyone can, any student can go and get their breakfast and lunch there. And then I thought the Teacher Appreciation Week, they did a great job, right? I thought they did a good job over there at Sunset View. That's my report.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you, Terry. All right, next we're going to have our superintendent's report.
Okay, I have 4 quick items. One is that I've approved 9 travel requests according to the authority granted to me by the board and in policy and procedure. All of those except for 2 are in state, but as you know, in policy and procedure, we regard Las Vegas as being in state given its proximity. So all 9 of these are quote in state unquote. Secondly, I wanted to draw your attention to a letter which is attached to my section of board docs. This is from Utah High School Activities Association Director Rob Cuff, congratulating the 2022 5A State Girls Golf Champions, who are the Timpview girls golf team. So that's in your board docs. costs.
Can I interject one more in there? Timpview had the mile run state champ too in
Okay.
girls. So
When and if I get that, I'll include it. I also wanted to mention that sometimes there are questions about, how do we spend our money? I'm given an allocation of a budget every year, and I generally don't spend much of it. When I have money left over at the end of a school year, I'll either carry it forward or I'll carry a portion of it forward. In past years, I purchased such things as flat screen TVs for entire schools with the budget that I had left over. I sent a significant portion of money to the technology department so they could fund new computers that they were otherwise unable to. And I'm not saying this to boast or to have a big fuss made about it. It's the right thing to do. This is money intended to help the district. So if I'm not spending it on other things, then let's get it out there. I just sent yesterday, directed Joe Rankin to send $30,000 to Franklin to fund and support their space lab. And that should help. Principal Benson is pretty happy. And then I've also advised Director Chad Duncan that I'm holding aside approximately $300,000 to fund and the board who've heard me talk about this before know about it, to fund the secondary attendance initiative that we're working on, trying to get some equipment and some better processes in place. And we hope to pilot that at least one school in August, and assuming it goes well, it should expand for the rest of the secondary programs. I have one other item to share with you. 10 years ago, almost to the day, I started work here in the Provo City School District. I'd like to excerpt from a letter that I'm going to hand to Board President Melanie Hall. Due to a number of reasons, which include some nagging health problems caused by the incessant stress of the job, I feel strongly that the time has come for me to announce my plan to retire. Don't get too happy, it's a year away. But 1 year from now, so at the end of June 2023, I'll be riding off into the sunset. I will hand this letter to Melanie, and then tomorrow before the end of the day, I will send a copy of this by way of email to the entire board. That's my report tonight.
I don't know if I want to take this. So. But thank you for coming to our meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, thank you for being here. Have a good evening. We'll leave it on that.